Hello, world. It's John Pinto, your roving realtor, bon vivant video blogger, podcaster. And I am here with Eric Syren, all things home, roof, termite, and home inspection. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, Eric.
Thank you, John. Same to you.
Thank you. And Rafael Betances, all things roof, termite, home, pool, inspection, ordering. Merry Christmas. Feliz Navidad.
Merry Christmas, guys. Nice to see you guys again.
Feliz Navidad. That sounds pretty good rolling off my Italian
Yeah,
tongue, right?
I like the pronunciation. You sound
Well,
like a nature, like a natural.
Well, remember, the Italians are the first Latinos. Where the hell do you think
Exactly.
Latina is? It's not in the Dominican Republic. It's not in
Right.
Spain.
That's
It's
correct.
not in Argentina. It's outside of Rome. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Right.
So today we're going to talk about the dreaded further inspections. The dreaded further inspections. Now, uh, Eric, uh, as good, effective, experienced realtors are trying to minimize variables up front and in their transactions and after their transactions.
Right.
So we want as much articulated in those inspections as we possibly can. Every now and then, we can't help it. We get the dreaded further inspection. And so let's start off with the dreaded further foundation inspection.
Right.
So I'll wax poetic because when I'm showing a piece of property or doing my agent's visual inspection disclosure, I'm walking around the exterior of the house. I'm looking at the gutters. I'm looking at the downspouts. I'm looking at the drainage. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm looking at any cracking around the mud sill around the bottom of the foundation,
Mhm.
less concerned about vertical cracks, more concerned about horizontal cracks where the foundation is actually bowing out, where the foundation is kind of, see if I could do this, it's going out like this.
Right.
So give me your perspective. Your inspectors are out there, they see the inspection and they give us the dreaded further inspection. Tell us about that.
Right. So like you said, it does happen. You do get a further inspection from time to time. Sometimes it can't be helped. But the next thing you should be doing is figuring out when can you get your inspectors back out to further inspect those items that you could not see, because we want to disclose as much information as we possibly can, and you want to protect yourself by disclosing this information. So first things first, when can we get back out there, whether it's talking to the buyer, seller, whoever needs to give us access, I guess it would be the seller, obviously, to
Yeah.
get us back out there and get that inspection done.
Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but generally speaking, when the home inspector, most of the time it's the home inspector, it's not the termite inspector, calling for a further inspection on the foundation, what they're calling for is a structural engineer or a foundation specialist to come out to the property. They're not calling for the home inspector to come out and take a second look. Am I correct on that, or am I in error?
Well, if we couldn't get out and get into the crawl space, we're going to call for a further inspection if we could not see it on the initial visit.
Okay.
If we did inspect it and we found something that was a concern, big cracks in the foundation, sill plate is not attached to the foundation, something like that, then we are going to suggest you get a qualified either structural engineer or contractor that deals with foundations, someone that can give an opinion as to what, if any, repairs would need to be done out there.
Okay, so let's bifurcate those two issues. Raphael knows what bifurcate means because his vocabulary is better than mine. And let's talk about the home inspector coming back. Now, the home inspector is coming back, I find, for one of two reasons. There was personal property impeding opening the crawl access door.
Right.
That's probably number one. Or
Yep.
number two, they opened the door, they put their heads down, and there was a foot or two of standing water.
Ooh. Yeah.
Are those the two? Is there a third? Is there a third reason?
Or there could be some kind of animal down there. We have had raccoons, skunks, squirrels, you name it.
Ah, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Critters,
Right.
possums.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Now, so let's go there for a minute. With the standing water, I'm thinking that's probably coming from a faulty grade or from a uh, non-functioning or malfunctioning set of gutters and downspouts. The recommendation is going to be to put in some kind of a sump pump or something down there, correct?
Yeah. Typically, that's what it's going to be. There could be a number of reasons. You may have a high water table in that area.
Hmm.
The downspouts and gutters, the grading is improper. All these things could add up to having standing water down there in the crawl space. And typically, the concrete really doesn't care if it's wet, it's sitting in the soil anyway, but you don't want continuous standing water because it's going to allow your foundation to settle down. And it's also going to put a lot of water vapor in that area, which is going to start to rot out the wood underneath the crawl space. So when you see standing water, it's something that you're going to want to figure out a solution for.
Okay, so let's talk about problem solution.
Mhm.
If it's the dead of winter, there's a lot of rain and you got standing water, you've
Right.
got a problem because as a good listing agent, a good buyer's agent, and a savvy seller and a savvy buyer, they want to minimize the variables. So we can't get down there and do the inspections if we're listing the property, contracting to buy the property,
Yeah.
processing the escrow, there's standing water, and there's no chance for it to drain. So, what are the possible solutions to that problem and the possible preemptive actions to avoid that problem?
Um, so the solution typically, as you said, was to get a sump pump down there. If we're doing a termite at the same time, the termite guy can write a recommendation to put a sump pump the water out. We put plastic down because even though you pump out that water, obviously it's still going to be muddy down there. So you put down some plastic so we can get down there and do a limited inspection of that crawl space. Um, and preemptively, honestly, I would suggest people when it's raining, if you got a crawl space, take a look down there. I tell that to people when I'm doing inspections. If it's raining, take a look. The rule of thumb is if you still have standing water 3 days after it stopped raining, you've got a problem where you need someone to come in and mitigate that.
Okay. And what kind of a vendor are you calling to pick up a sump pump for you and install it and get it running?
Actually, you'd be surprised. You can actually call landscape contractors.
Oh,
They would be perfect for that. Yep.
okay. That's very
Yep.
helpful.
Yep.
That's very helpful.
Hmm.
Eric, the answer man. I love it.
I try, buddy.
Raphael, does he never not have an answer? I don't think so. I like that.
Hey,
Okay, so let's
I
go in the other direction. That's a real problem that we just talked about, but
Yeah.
let's go in the other direction. And you are in the basement or the crawl space,
Right.
and you see, as I think is reflected on the reports, we're seeing cracks settling and efflorescence above and beyond what we consider normal. Buyer to have a specialty contractor come out. So let's go from the most severe to the least severe from my standpoint. When you see these horizontal cracks where you actually have the foundation kind of separating in half, the bottom half is separating from the top half, and it's
Hmm.
the top half is kind of folding on top of the bottom half. It's not as extreme as I'm saying, but you could see that's the trend.
Right.
Explain to us what's going on there. How severe is that? What are the next steps and what is the possible mitigation on that?
Well, you picked the absolute worst situation. Especially we are here in California. We have earthquakes. So now when you have a horizontal crack, you've basically separated your foundation into two halves. And you get some lateral movement, and you get to be one of those pictures in the news where the house is slid off the foundation. That would be the worst case scenario. Even in places where you don't have earthquakes, once that's happened, the foundation is no longer serving its intended purpose. It's now in pieces. And typically the reasoning for that would be when that foundation was poured, we put rebar in the foundation. If it's too close to the outer edge of the foundation, rebar will rust because concrete is constantly wicking up water. Just the rusting action of that rebar is enough pressure and power to crack that foundation in half. And at this point, it needs to be replaced.
So when you're talking about buying a house with that kind of a condition, it throws it into another category. As a seller and a listing agent, you're basically selling a fixer-upper, where people have to reconcile that we're going to do a major remodel of the house and we're going to start at the foundation. And that has to be reflected in the price. You have to price it as a fixer-upper. And you don't want to depend on an oblivious buyer and an oblivious buyer's agent to buy that property and not understand what they're buying, because it's just too much liability. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I wouldn't want to go to sleep at night knowing that that foundation is cracked in half and the buyer's not quite certain what the ramifications could be of that, or even if it is cracked. And if we didn't get down there and do that inspection, there would be no way to disclose that information to the buyer.
Okay, so let's talk about item number two, less severe, in my opinion. The vertical cracks, where you might even be able to fit a pencil in them. The recommendation is usually look at the drainage, look at the downspouts, uh, look at the gutters, and let's epoxy the the voids so moisture doesn't get inside. Now, I've always been surprised that those vertical cracks do not indicate a bigger problem, but that in my experience has been that it's not considered anywhere near as severe a problem as those horizontal cracks. Can you enlighten us?
That's right. Your foundation, the perimeter is a wall. We call it a stem wall, and underneath there are also piers. And if you think about it, the piers are little individual pieces of foundation, and they work just fine as being little independent pieces. So if the foundation is actually cracked in half, um, but in your mind's eye, you could imagine pushing that foundation right back together, the cracks, everything matches up.
Hmm.
That's not a big of a concern as those other horizontal cracks we were talking about. Now, there can be a case where you'll have what we call a differential settlement, which would mean one side has dropped down, the other side has remained kind of plumb and level.
Hmm.
And typically, why that happens is drainage.
Yeah.
One side of the house is getting wet, the other side of the house is staying dry. And when that foundation soil is getting wet, it just allows the foundation over time to continually settle and settle and settle. And your house is basically breaking in half. That's the worst of a vertical crack. But we see vertical cracks in houses all the time. I see 100-year-old homes in Oakland, Berkeley, all over the place. And there's cracks in the foundation right in half. It's a concern, but it's nowhere near as big of a concern as that horizontal crack would be, or like we talked about, the differential settlement would be. And the nice thing about it is you're going to have some pictures in your report. You can see exactly what it looks like and see how big of a crack, how big of a concern it is, and what type of a crack it is.
Okay, and I will conclude my experience and findings, observations, and feedback on the foundation issue with efflorescence. Now, the efflorescence usually seems to, again, bifurcate in two directions. One is the mineral deposits that are evident on the exterior of the concrete perimeter of the foundation, which is one thing, which poses questions. But then the other is the kind of efflorescence where the inspector sees it and probes the concrete perimeter with a screwdriver, and the screwdriver penetrates 6 inches, and a big chunk of the foundation falls out.
Right.
Okay. So could you explain the extremes that I have just articulated there?
Absolutely. So in the first case, efflorescence is basically the salt that's left over after water has penetrated through the concrete foundation. Again, people think of concrete as some sort of an impenetrable material, but really it wants to soak up water like a sponge. So if you have water around the perimeter of the house, the foundation gets wet, and when it dries, the salts in the water are left behind, and that white salty material is basically the evidence that you've got water around the outside of your house.
Which is penetrating,
right.
which means you have a faulty grade foundation,
Yep.
which means somebody needs to go outside with a shovel, get that dirt graded away from the house, so the water is going away from the house, and do an audit on the gutters and the downspouts to prevent further penetration of that water, correct?
Yep, absolutely. And it's one of those pay a little now or pay a lot later. If you let that situation continue, you're going to end up with the extreme that you talked about, which is basically now your foundation is returning to its basic elements again. It's saturated with water continuously, and it's breaking back down into sand and concrete and powder and aggregate, and it's lost its structural integrity. We call it spalling. And if we see that, and like you said, you're exactly right. You probe it with a screwdriver, big chunks of foundation start to fall off. That's a big problem. Now, again, your foundation has lost its structural integrity and needs to be replaced. So you could have fixed the downspouts, did your grading, and got away with no problems to the foundation, or you let it go, and now you have to fix the foundation.
I remember back in the mid 70s, I sold a house on South 12th Street. And in our due diligence, we went into the basement because the house was built in 1906.
Okay.
And with the home inspector who put the screwdriver in the retaining wall.
Yeah.
And I looked at that. I looked at my buyer. I said, we're finding another house. We're going to find another house.
Yeah.
Because even back then, that would have been 25, 30,000 to jack the house up, excavate the foundation, demo it, and pour another foundation. I mean, that's pretty much a cash improvement, if you could get a lender to lend on it.
Right. Absolutely. And it's an improvement that nobody planned on doing. And it's not a fun one. You're not going to have your friends or your family over and say, look at the new foundation we poured. Doesn't that look great, you guys? No one cares about that, but it's obviously the most important aspect of the home.
Indeed, indeed. Rafael, I need to ask you, as you listen to Eric and I running our mouth on these obscure subjects, or not so obscure subjects, how amazed are you of the depth of these rabbit holes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure I mentioned it a million times in previous videos. It never fails to amaze. So,
yeah, well, as a real estate broker, you really need to have X-ray vision.
Yeah.
We're ordering the inspections usually not to find out about the house, but to confirm what we suspect about it already.
Yeah.
But thank God that organizations like HomeGuard are there, because you guys are experts. You put it in writing. You provide some relief to the homeowner and the listing and buyer's agents as long as they take the time to read and understand the reports. Eric, you've done such a great job enlightening us. Let me give you the opportunity to leave some words of wisdom to listing agents, buyers and sellers, but especially the agents, on the dreaded further inspection on the foundation. What message would you like to impart?
Well, I'd say my biggest piece of advice is if there's a further inspection on anything, especially the foundation, make sure you get that scheduled. We get back out there, and nobody buys a house without getting a further inspection of that crawl space. We want to know what we're getting into. We want to disclose what you're getting into, and everyone will sleep well that night.
Indeed, indeed. Rafael, if somebody wants to order roof termite home or pool inspection, where do they text you? Where do they email you?
Absolutely. You guys can see my number right there next to my name. It's 707-616-8762. You can text me or you can email me at rbetances@homeguard.com. That's the letter R and my last name at homeguard.com. I'll be more than happy to have a conversation.
Beautiful. Well, gentlemen, thank you for helping with this video, and thank you for imparting all this information. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you on our next video. Bye.